The following is the most important extract from Muhammad's sermon to his followers. His last will and testament, just before he died in the year 632 AD. O people, understand my words which I convey to you. I leave behind me two things, the Quran and my example, the Sunnah. And if you follow these, you will never go astray. Most people, whether followers of Muhammad or not, do not know that Muhammad's Sunnah is actually considered and acted upon as equal to the Quran, and in some cases overrules Allah's instructions. For those who do not know, let me explain what Sunnah is. Sunnah is an Arabic word that means habit or usual practice. The Muslim usage of this term refers to the sayings and living habits of Muhammad. The Sunnah of Muhammad includes his specific words, habits, practices, and silent approvals. It is significant to the traditions of Muhammad and Islam because it addresses ways of life dealing with friends, family, and government. In the context of the biographical records of Muhammad, Sunnah indeed often stands synonymous to Hadith, as most of the personality traits of Muhammad are known through descriptions about him, his sayings, and his actions. There are instructions in Muhammad's Quran that are not followed because the Muhammadan exegetes decided for their convenience to follow his Sunnah instead, that his Sunnah overrules Quran. Case 1. The stoning verse. The case of the stoning verse or Ayat al-Rajm is a perfect example. A verse that does not exist in the Quran but only in his Sunnah. Al-Nur 24.2. The woman and the man guilty of adultery or fornication, flog each of them with 100 stripes. Sahih al-Bukhari 8.825, narrated by Abdullah bin Umar. The Jews came to Allah's Apostle and mentioned to him that a man and a lady among them had committed illegal sexual intercourse. Allah's Apostle said to them, "What do you find in the Torah regarding the Rajm, stoning verse?" Deuteronomy 22.22. If a man be found lying with a woman married to a husband, then they shall both of them die by stoning, both the man that lay with the woman and the woman. So shalt thou put away evil from Israel. Then Allah's Apostle ordered that the two persons be stoned to death. I saw the man bending over the woman so as to protect her from the stones. Why don't the followers of Muhammad not comply with Allah's perfectly clear decree, but follow the one of Muhammad's Sunnah? How is it possible for any believer to abide by Muhammad's Sunnah and not by Allah's command? Why would Muhammad's Sunnah overrule Allah's explicit edict? I repeat again, the answer resides in the fact that the scholars of Islam, when it suits their agenda, consider Muhammad's Sunnah equal and sometimes superior to Allah's revelations. Sahih al-Bukhari 8.816, narrated by Ibn Abbas. Umar ibn Khattab said, "I'm afraid that after a long time has passed, people may say, we do not find the verses of the Rajm, stoning to death, in the Holy Book, and consequently they may go astray by leaving an obligation that Allah has revealed. Lo, I confirm that the penalty of Rajm be inflicted on him who commits illegal sexual intercourse if he is already married. Surely Allah's Apostle carried out the penalty of Rajm, and so did we after him." The scholars of Islam exhibit an unusual split intellectual disorder syndrome that they suffer regarding many of the Quran and Sunnah instructions and contradictions. Omar asserts that the stoning was to be applied only to men or women who are married and yet fornicate. This punishment did not apply to men or women who have consensual sex when unmarried. Yet contrary to the letter and spirit of all the above, the enforcers of Sharia stone adulterers to death, be they married or unmarried, overruling both Quran and Sunnah. Case 2. Subjects of hijab and niqab. In the Quran, the term hijab is invariably used to mean a screen, curtain, divide, to separate the guests from the females of Muhammad's household. The story that explains the reason for the particular revelation of this verse is mentioned in detail in Bukhari Hadith 8.255/7. The Arabic word hijab is used in the Quran 4 times, as in the following verses: 7.46, 17.45, 38.32, 42.51, to describe a screen, a divide, a separator, a curtain, a veil of separation. In none of them is the word associated with any kind of dress or costume, covering the whole body of anyone or anything. Al-Ahzab 33.53. O ye who believe, enter not the Prophet's houses until leave is given to you. Such behavior annoys the Prophet. He is ashamed to dismiss you, but Allah is not ashamed to tell you the truth. And when you ask his ladies for anything you want, ask them from behind a screen, hijabi. That makes for greater purity for your hearts and theirs. It is crystal clear from the verse above that all of his instructions are to do with Muhammad's personal annoyance at the behavior of his guests. As usual with Muhammad and his Quran, an instant made-to-order revelation was descended to turn his personal objections into unchallengeable divine sanctions, emanating from the unsuspecting supreme pagan god of the Kaaba called Allah. By no stretch of the imagination can any intelligent being construe that this verse implies or means to cover the body of the female believer with any clothing. It only admonishes that there should be a separation between the guest area of the home of the believers from the private area. While the idea of the hijab was to create an atmosphere of modesty among the females and males of the believers, the male Muhammadan exegetes created an incredible set of lies to control their women in body, soul and mind, rendering them totally subservient to their will. To prove my point, I put down a challenge worth 10,000 pounds to the first human being who can show all of us the word hijab or niqab in the Quran as describing the covering of the believing woman from head to toe. Case 3. Wine prohibition. In the Quran, wine is called khamr and is mentioned explicitly in the following 5 verses only. Al-Baqarah 2:2.19. They ask thee concerning wine, khamri, and gambling. Say, in them is great sin, ithmu, and some profit, manfa', for men. But the sin, ithmuhuma, is greater than the profit, naf'ihima. In no way is this verse a clear and uncompromising edict on the two personal practices of drinking alcohol and gambling. I would like to point out that the adjectives used above to describe the usefulness or harm of drinking intoxicants and of gambling are in the form of admonitions, advice, and not as direct and unambiguous commands or prohibitions to desist from either of them. Moreover, it does not make sense to use the adjective sin, which is a moral concept, in contradistinction to profit, which is an economic concept. In fact, the Arabic word manfa' should have been translated to benefit and not profit, and the opposite should have been harm instead of sin. Nowhere in the Quran is the word haram, prohibited, associated with the drinking of wine. Nor is there any punishment for being intoxicated. The punishment of 80 lashes was mandated by the later followers of Muhammad from his Sunna, which represents a man-made ruling and not one from Allah. Yet once more, Sunnah overrules Quran, if not equal to it. An-Nisa 4.43. O ye who believe, approach not prayers with a mind befogged, sukara, until you can understand all what you say, nor in a state of ceremonial impurity. The word sukara means intoxicated. The verse does not prohibit the drinking of wine. It is only pointing out to the believers that they should not attend prayers while under the influence, nor should they attend when unclean. The Quran advises in this verse against drunkenness during prayers only. This means that the Muslims are actually permitted to drink some alcohol in between the times of prayers, though the number of prayers per day would limit drunkenness. However, this further implies that after the night prayer, the final one, Muslims can even get drunk. Al-Ma'idah 5.90. O ye who believe, wine, khamru, and gambling stones, and divination by arrows are an abomination of Satan's handiwork. Eschew such abomination that you may prosper. Satan's plan is but to excite enmity and hatred between you with intoxicants, khamri, and gambling, and hinder you from the remembrance of Allah and from prayer. Will you not then abstain? Yet once again, abomination means detestation or repugnance, and the verb used is eschew, meaning avoid, which is a warning and not an outright prohibition, haram. Al-Nahl 16.67. And from the fruit of the date palm and the vine, you get wholesome drink, sakara, and food. So-called believers and unbelieving kuffar, in the whole of the Quran, there are only 5 instances where the word khamr is used explicitly. And only in Al-Baqarah 2.219 is it frowned upon but not prohibited. Once again, Muhammad's Sunnah supersedes the Quran. As I had conclusively revealed in several of my chapters, every single letter, word, ayah, verse, and surah chapter in the Quran are actually the product and discretions of Muhammad's mind, representing his alter ego, his autobiography, but cleverly projected into the unsuspecting mouth of Allah, to give them the aura of sanctity and divinity. Allah, Satan, and Gabriel are most certainly the multiple voices of the ventriloquist Muhammad. Case 4. Painting and Sculpting. Ladies and gentlemen, please be aware that the words picture, painting, sculpture, or sculpting do not exist in the Quran, but are repeatedly mentioned in the hadiths or traditions. Muhammad plagiarized, pirated, and plundered these concepts and ideas, and many more, from the Torah of the Jews, as in the following, and incorporated them in his Sunnah, but not the Quran. Exodus 20.2. I am the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for you any engraved images. You shall not bow down yourself to them, nor serve them. Leviticus 26.1. You shall make no idols or graven image, nor erect a pillar, nor shall you set up any image of stone in your land to bow down to it, for I am the Lord your God. God's commands are crystal clear that they forbid the Israelites from creating images or statues, to which they bow down in veneration, because it would be idolatry. As long as they do not venerate their own creations, these commands do not forbid the Israelites from actually painting and or sculpting any form they choose to for decorations and art. It was the rabbis of the Jews who put up rules and regulations forbidding the Jews from painting and or sculpting any forms of humans and animals. Here again were man-made rules imposed upon the believers. Muhammad, the consummate pirate of the desert, plundered these rules from Jewish traditions, not knowing they are not forbidden by God. Sahih al-Bukhari 8.246, narrated by Abu Huraira. The Prophet said, Allah created Adam in his picture, 60 cubits in height, about 30 meters. The all-knowledgeable Muhammad, the supreme genius of Muhammadan Islam, asserts that Adam was at least 90 feet in height in the image of Allah. The Muhammadan exegetes, to cover up or explain away such an absurd and impossible height, tell us that later generations of his descendants became shorter and shorter until they arrived to the current height. If this were true, one would expect to find thousands of remains of gigantic people. These remains would not only be of skeletons, but should also include tools they used, weapons, artwork, remains of buildings, etc. Furthermore, these findings should show a definite difference in size of people living, let us say, 7000 BC, 3000 BC, and 1000 AD. Since there must have been many such people, archaeologists should have had no problem finding plenty of remains of people that were 80 feet, 60 feet, 40 feet, and 20 feet tall. Where are they? Are there any such findings at all? As far as I know, there is not a single archaeological or biological support for Muhammad's teaching about the changing height of human beings over recorded history. Unerringly, Muhammad was as usual wrong on all counts. Sunan Abu Dawud 227, narrated by Ali bin Abi Talib. Muhammad said, angels do not enter the house where there is a picture, a dog, or a person who is sexually defiled. As I mentioned before, these ideas do not appear in the Quran. Most of the following stories exist only in the traditions. Sahih al-Bukhari 5.235, narrated by Aisha. Muhammad said to Aisha, his child bride, you have been shown to me twice in my dream. I saw you pictured on a piece of silk, and someone said to me, this is your wife. When I uncovered the picture, I saw that it was yours. I said, if this is from Allah, it will be done. Al-Tirmidhi Hadith 6182, narrated by Aisha. Gabriel brought a picture of her, Aisha, on a piece of green silk to Allah's Messenger, said, this is your wife in this world and the next. Muhammad always had the superior rules only for himself. He who condemned pictures saw his would-be child bride on a piece of silk without associating it with Satan. Sahih al-Bukhari 4.570, narrated by Ibn Abbas. The Prophet entered the Kaaba and found in it the pictures of Abraham and Mary. On that he said, what is the matter with the Quraysh? Have they not heard that angels do not enter a house in which there are pictures? This is a monstrous and obvious lie and deception. Since Muhammad prayed in the Kaaba most of his adult life without once mentioning any pictures in it, either in his Quran or in the earlier hadiths until this instant. How is it conceivable that he did not see these pictures before? In fact, Muhammad, the alleged believer in the one and only Allah, prayed all his adult life in the Kaaba with the polytheists while it was a house of idolatry harboring 360 stone gods and goddesses. Case 5. Music, dancing and bells. Ladies and gentlemen, please be aware that the words music, musical, sing, bell, bells, dance, dancing are not mentioned in the Quran but appear in many hadiths about his Sunnah. The word singing appears only once in Al-Zummar 39.75. Sahih Muslim Hadith 5277, narrated by Abu Hurairah. Allah's Messenger said, angels do not accompany the travelers who have with them a dog or a bell. Sahih Muslim Hadith 5279, narrated by Abu Hurairah. Allah's Messenger said, the bell is the musical instrument of the Satan. Sahih al-Bukhari Hadith 1.2, narrated by Aisha. Al-Harith bin Hisham asked Allah's Apostle, O Allah's Apostle, how is the divine inspiration revealed to you? Allah's Apostle replied, sometimes it is revealed like the ringing of a bell. This form of inspiration is the hardest of all. Dear listeners, since the bell, according to Muhammad, is the instrument of Satan, it is then no wonder that Muhammad's most difficult revelations were accompanied with the sound of the ringing of bells. Sahih al-Bukhari 2.72, narrated by Aisha. Abu Bakr came to my house while two Ansari girls were singing beside me. Abu Bakr said protestingly, musical instruments of Satan in the house of Allah's Apostle? Sahih al-Bukhari 7.494b, narrated by Abu Malik al-Ash'ari, that he heard the Prophet saying, from among my followers there will be some people who will consider illegal sexual intercourse, the wearing of silk, the drinking of alcoholic drinks, and the use of musical instruments as lawful. Allah will destroy them during the night. Once again I have demonstrated how Muhammad's Sunnah is equal to and or superior to the Quran. This is of course not surprising, since both of them were authored, composed and concocted by Muhammad to serve his selfish and depraved purposes. Case 6. Poetry, chess, gold and silk. Although the Quran does not prohibit reciting poetry, playing chess, wearing gold and silk, nonetheless all of them are forbidden to the male Muhammadan Muslims in the Sunnah. Al-Shu'ara 26.224. And the poets, it is those straying in evil who follow them. Al-Anbiya 21.5. Nay, they say he is a poet. Let him then bring us a sign like the ones that were sent to the prophets. Al-Saffat 37.36. And say, what? Shall we give up our gods for the sake of a poet possessed? Sahih Muslim Hadith 5611, narrated by Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. We were going with Allah's Messenger, and as we reached Al-Arj, we met a poet who was reciting a poem. Thereupon Allah's Messenger said, catch the Satan, for filling the belly of a person with pus is better than stuffing his brain with poetry. Ladies and gentlemen, be aware that poets supplied the Arabs with their mental and spiritual nourishment, since they memorized the ancestry, deeds, glories and achievements of their tribes, and passed them on to future generations through their students or disciples to keep the records alive. Poets were actually the news media par excellence of Arabia. They were lethal weapons, since a very capable and articulate poet of a small tribe could elevate it in poems to levels greater than that of a much more powerful one. As far as my research has demonstrated, not a single poet during the long period of centuries of the so-called Jahiliyyah, days of ignorance period, that is before Muhammad and Islam, was ever a poet murdered for what he or she recited, unlike what was done by Muhammad and his followers. By the way, there were more female poets among the Jahiliyyah Arabs than during the entirety of 1400 years of Muhammad and Islam. Some of these poets were so formidable that Muhammad had at least 2 of them assassinated because they satirized him. So-called believers and unbelieving kuffar, Muhammad ordered the assassination and slaughter of any Arabian poet who satirized, criticized, or demonstrated that Muhammad was actually a charlatan, a pirate of the desert, and a traitor to his people. He had them butchered invariably at night when utterly unprepared, be they men or women, young or old, free or slave, as amply and very clearly recorded in the Hadiths. Al-Hajj 22.23. Allah will admit those who believe to gardens beneath which rivers flow. They shall be adorned therein with bracelets of gold and pearls, and their garments there will be of silk. Al-Fatir 35:33. Gardens of eternity will they enter, therein will they be adorned with bracelets of gold and pearls, and the garments there will be of silk. Sunan Abu Dawud 422, narrated by Abu Huraira. The Prophet said, if anyone wants to put a ring of fire on one he loves, let him put a gold ring on him. If anyone wants to put a necklace of fire on one he loves, let him put a gold necklace on him. And if anyone wants to put a bracelet of fire on one he loves, let him put a gold bracelet on him. Sunan Abu Dawud 4226, narrated by Asma. The Prophet said, any woman who wears a gold necklace will have a similar one of fire put on her neck on the day of resurrection. And any woman who puts a gold earring in her ear will have a similar one of fire put in her ear on the day of resurrection. Sunan Abu Dawud 4046, narrated by Ali ibn Abi Talib. The Prophet of Allah took silk and held it in his right hand, and took gold and held it in his left hand, and said, both of these are prohibited to the males of my community. Sahih Muslim 5612, narrated by Buraidah ibn al-Hasib. Allah's Apostle said, he who plays chess is like one who dyes his hand with the flesh and blood of swine. Based upon all the above Muhammadan Muslim sources, quoted by chapter and verse, we can conclude 2 items. A. Muhammad's Sunnah on several important rules and concepts overrule the Quran. B. It is not any more a wonder to understand why many of Muhammad's male followers would rather die slaughtering defenseless, unbelieving kuffar civilians than live such a desolate, joyless and unhappy life. After all, Muhammad promises them eternal, sexual, sensual and carnal pleasures in his whorehouse version of paradise, being regaled by every single item they were prohibited from in life. This should not be strange to those who have read Muhammad's Quran, because it contains absolutely no joy or happiness, but is full to the brim with hate, war, pain, torture, hell, damnation, discrimination, racism. unhappiness, submission, misery, and stupidity. As I have demonstrated in over 780 unchallengeable chapters on my website of inthenameofallah.org, and my 285 video audios on my blog, that Muhammad's Quran is, to put it in a nutshell, a hate-mongering, war-mongering, racist and misogynist scripture, and hence utterly ungodly. All of the above can be accessed by simply Googling Rassooli.